We have two people who are on the House Committee, Education Committee. We have two candidates. One candidate is going to be running in 2022 for the Georgia State Education Superintendent. One candidate is running in 2022 as for the office of Georgia State Insurance Commissioner, and they're Dems. We don't mind that. Okay, and we also have a 2018 Democratic candidate for the Georgia State School Superintendent. We also have a White House press correspondent officer who was in the White House during the Obama and Bush administrations. So I think that sounds pretty strong. And I'd like to claim one of the board members as Coweta's own, that would Otha Thornton, recently came to Coweta County, and he was the one that suggested that we have discussion of critical race theory, and that is why this is, he suggested also we open it up to the general public, not just keep it to ourselves. So this meeting is a result of Otha's contribution. He's been a big help in putting this together. So I'd like to start off with the speakers, and I would ask the speakers to please introduce themselves, say how they became involved with critical race theory. And so we get a little human flavor there, not just the discussion about technical matters. And then we go right down the line. Representative Doreen Carter is coming in remotely. And so I expect it'll all go smoothly, technology being what it is. But first of all is Tracy Pendley, who is going to tell us about critical race theory. I don't know if y'all, let me just tell you, each one of them is taking a subject matter, and maybe we can get the agenda up on the wall there. But Tracy is going to start us off with what exactly is critical race theory. At the end of all the speakers' presentations, I asked Otha if he would wrap it up and tell us what we've heard so it can be reinforced. And at that point, we'll take questions, both remotely, we hope, and from y'all here in person. So Tracy, if you would take it away. Okay, let's see if it works.
I probably don't need it because I'm an elementary teacher. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for those of you who are joining us online. My name is Tracy, and I'm the 2020 and 2021 Georgia Teacher of the Year. It means that I got to do all kinds of fun stuff, like travel the state and speak with stakeholders, with families, with teachers, with leaders, with students. And it was extraordinary. I can tell you hands down that Georgia's educators care deeply about your kids, and we're doing the work. We truly, truly are. The way that I came to be here this evening is that my very first research when I got in, I didn't even know I wanted to be a teacher yet. I knew I wanted to study sociology and change the lives of kids for the better. That's what I knew. My mom was the baby of 11 kids. She was an addict. I went to 9 different schools. I lived with 9 different caretakers. My twin brother and I had a lot going on growing up, and we really relied on our educators. And so when I went off to school, I wanted to make a difference for kids, the same way that my teachers had done for me. Well, I went off to University of Chicago and immediately began studying critical race theory in their School of Sociology. I was doing sociology of education, race, and ethnicity. And I went on to graduate from the Urban Teacher Education Program there. There was strongly social justice focused, but more importantly, they taught me how to build those relationships with kids, but also with family members. And I think that's one really important reason why we're here tonight. Yeah. It is definitely. Is this better? Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Yeah, y'all really need to come on to my class. I jump on tables and everything. But I think one of the reasons we're here right now is because there's been a breakdown of trust. There is something going on, some message not getting delivered between teachers and families, and we're here to really talk about that tonight. So what is critical race theory and how did this come up to be a topic? Well, last spring, it started bubbling up very, very slowly. It started with a Fox News anchor mentioning it in an interview with President Trump at the time. And after that, it took off like fire. At this time, I was serving on our Georgia School State Board. So I got to be there as an ex officio member. I got to listen, I got to speak, I got to read the resolutions. I did not get to vote, however. When the very first resolution came out in June of 2021, I spoke against it and attempted to inform our board members what critical race theory actually is, and that no, it is not being taught in our classrooms right now. And I will tell all of you, no, it is not being taught in our classrooms right now. And I have not been in every single classroom in Georgia, but I do know our educators, and I've spoken with many, many, many people at length on these topics. So what is it? What is not being taught in our schools? Critical race theory is an upper graduate theory that basically says that racism is baked into our system. It's institutionalized. It is not so much about a person's individual beliefs. It's about the actions that individuals take that may unwittingly lead to more racism, more organizations that have barriers put up for our students of color and our educators of color and our families. So what are some examples of that? Well, after the civil rights movement of the 60s, legal scholars and activists in the 70s started noticing that we kind of lost our momentum with the civil rights movement, and things were supposed to be hunky-dory now, and they weren't, right? And so scholars started saying, there's something here. There's something going on. And so they started looking at our policies more carefully. And here are a few examples of reasons why critical race theory came to be. When we look at mortgage loans from banks, right? We realized that they were selectively being given. When we looked at how the city of Atlanta itself was built and how different neighborhoods are built, the zoning regulations that created segregation, even those many years ago, still impact us today. Here is a 2022 example when we have single family home zoning that prevents students and families from having affordable housing in those neighborhoods. One area that I've used critical race theory in my own research is around gentrification and school choice. Now, I am not against charter schools. I absolutely love charter schools when they have a very specific mission and they are serving that population of students. However, what we notice is that our very private decisions that we make at home have very public consequences. And so when you have a gentrifying family move into an underprivileged neighborhood and they build the McMansion and then they say, I don't want to send my kids to that public school, and they go charter instead. Well, what we ended up with on the east side of Atlanta over 15 years' time was segregation. Our neighborhood public schools were largely African-American, over 90%, whereas those brand new shiny charter schools were becoming increasingly white. Now, Tracy, what are you saying here? You're saying that the charter schools are only supposed to be for students of color? Nope, that's not what I'm saying. The research is so clear, you guys. When you look at the research, it says that integration in our classrooms is best. It's best for the kids that need the extra help, or for the kids that don't have the role models at home, or for the kids that just need that extra practice. It's also great for our students coming from middle and upper class families. It's good for everyone. So don't get me wrong there. The goal absolutely is integration and diversity. So educators have been accused of, most recently, of teaching that racism just exists point blank and that it is white people's fault. That is what we're hearing, right? Or that teachers want to make young white children feel guilty. It is so, so far from the truth. I want to tell you what is actually going on in the classroom. As a fourth grade teacher, one of my standards is Jim Crow, as well as enslavement. When I think about critical race theory, if I were going to apply that, then I would have a completely different conversation with my students. but it's a part of my standards. And I'm supposed to talk about Jim Crow, which was an external legal policy that was racist in nature. By definition, we can't argue with that. And so for educators, we're saying, well, how are we supposed to talk about this if the state demands that we teach it, but we're not allowed to say this no word? It's kind of scary. We just want to tell kids the facts. We don't want anyone to feel guilty. And I can tell you, being a teacher of an extraordinarily diverse classroom, that it makes our kids better. It makes them more resilient. We form the tightest knit community. Our kids stand up for one another. Never once have I had a parent come to me and say, you're making my child feel guilty. Now, do feelings come up? Yeah, history is hard to think about and talk about and learn. Some really crummy things have happened. But is it important that we share with our kids what happened, the facts? And yes, we will filter them appropriately to a child's developmental age. But it's important so that we don't make those mistakes. The second thing going on in the classroom right now is social emotional learning. And that is a topic that has been pushed nationally for the last 10 years, specifically in Georgia for the last 5 years. It's been a skill set that we have worked really hard to teach our students. What we realized is, just as we need to be explicit when we teach history, math, grammar, we have to be just as explicit when we're teaching our students, how do we think about ourselves? How do we bounce back? How do I share? How do I stand up to the bully? How do I recognize and accept differences in others respectfully? How do I disagree respectfully? That is what social emotional learning is about. And this has been a national push. And then I have done workshops on SEL for the Georgia Department of Education myself personally. And these are the 5 tenets. Now, I would have gone all elementary out on you and brought my anchor charts and colored markers, but that stuff is expensive and I'm saving it for the kids. So these are the 5 tenets: self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and here is the one that is so scary that brings us here tonight: social awareness. Social awareness is one of the main core competencies of SEL. And underneath that term of social emotional learning and social awareness is this idea of accepting and valuing diversity, inclusion, and yes, the scariest word of all, equity. I think that people forget that it's not a bad word. Equality is when everyone's getting the same thing because it's what's fair. Equity is when we give our students, our teachers, our families the supports that they need in order to be successful. And as a child of a drug addict, as a child who did not have role models in my home, as a child who frequently had to go ask neighbors for dinner, I can tell you hands down that social emotional learning is critical to a child's well-being. Learning the truth is critical. And teachers are definitely showing up for their students. We're professionals. We have degrees. Most of us still owe a whole lot of money on those degrees, thanks to our salaries that don't tend to increase. In March of 2020, we were heroes and we were celebrated. And then it wasn't 7 months later where we were being told we were lazy and just want to be in our pajamas at home. And that's not the case. Our teachers are amazing. And we do have a set process if a parent has a concern. The first advice I would give any educator is to build relationships with your families, and these problems will disappear. But so that our audience knows that there is a set protocol, if there is ever any issue in your child's class, I want you to, and if you want to write it down, please do. The first person you go to is the teacher. After that, the principal. The school PTA is third. The local school board is fourth. And if it's really that serious, we're taking it to the state school board. But micromanaging educators and students' education and taking away from them, I don't believe is the answer, because we really love your children.
Thank you so much, Tracy. And before we get to our next speaker, Representative Carter, who's coming remotely. I want to apologize to Dr. Howard because one of the things I wanted to brag about you is that you are on the Board of Education of Cobb County. So that's another expertise to add to this board. Sorry about that. Okay. How do we connect with Representative Doreen Carter?
Well, at first, I guess, can you hear me?
We can. Welcome.
I've always wanted to see you say that. Can you hear me now? Good evening, everyone. I am State Representative Doreen Carter. I represent Georgia House District 92, and my district covers parts of DeKalb and Rockdale, and my new district was Newton County. So thank you for inviting me to be with you all this evening. Coweta is not often that I get to come to Coweta County. My good friend Otha Thornton, we met when I was working over at the Georgia PTA. Probably where I first was really introduced to education advocacy. You know, my mother was a PTA mom and we were involved in PTA, and I really thought it was just about selling things until I came to the state office, and Mr. Thornton, who I believe you were national president or was soon to be national PTA president, so how we met. And he stressed really understanding policy. I don't think I was elected to the House at the time, but since being elected to the Georgia General Assembly, I've had the privilege to serve on the Education Committee. And this year, with all of the bills that we are being faced in the Education Committee, we set up a special Education Committee within inside of the Democratic House Caucus, in which I have the opportunity to chair, and my colleague, Representative Wilson, is also on the Education Committee with me. So I've been asked to talk to you about HB 888, and I always like to do what I'm asked whenever I'm brought in to speak. But I will have to say that after HB 888 was filed, shortly after we all got in an uproar, we saw HB 1084 that kind of slipped in quietly, but we have since started to really talk to our constituents about this bill, because this one we think may have a little more opportunity for traction. And then there's a similar bill in the Senate, which is SB 377. These are the bills that have been tagged as the critical race theory pieces of legislation. But what I would like to say off the bat and have everyone join in with me is the critical race theory is their conversation to distract us from the attempt to erase teaching U.S. history in public schools. And so I think if we could focus on what is really happening here, because as we've heard and you'll continue to hear, critical race theory isn't taught in our public schools in K through 12, but it is definitely a distractor. But since you asked me to talk to you about HB 888, that is what I am going to do. So in this bill, there are a few things that that really is targeting with teachers that they're prohibited from talking about, and there are some things that this bill allows. And I'll also talk a little bit about HB 1084. And the reason why I say HB 1084, we need to talk about, because when you look at the authors of the bills, the authors on 1084 are officers within the Republican Party, and their bills usually move a little faster and will probably make it to the floor. So in HB 888, it talks about prohibit school officials from compelling any individual to affirm, adopt, adhere to, profess, or promote concepts, and prohibits teaching curriculum or course standards that teach superiority or inferiority of any race, ethnicity, religion, or national origin. Adverse or advantageous treatment on this basis, collective guilt for past acts, Promotion on the basis of merit or work ethic is discriminatory. That individuals should feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or distress on account of their race or characteristics. The U.S. is systematically racist, requiring students to engage or observe discussion of public policy, allowing, of course, credit participation in lobbying, advocacy, or participation or partisan activity, using public funds to engage speakers or consultants to promote these concepts. Now, I haven't been in school in a while. Well, I have 3 sons that went to public school, and I don't recall them ever being taught any of the things that is prohibited in this bill. And since we have educators at the table with you tonight on this panel, they could possibly attest to whether or not this is something that has been taught or is being taught in our public schools. Now, HB 888 allows impartial, nonpartisan presentation of research-based history of race or ethnic groups, controversial aspects of history, historical treatment of groups based on race, ethnicity, or religion, voluntarily observation or engagement in nonpartisan discussions of public policy issues or other issues which some individuals may find unwelcome, disagreeable, or offensive. Now, if any of the items that are listed are prohibited or taught, here's how this is how it's going to be enforced. Publishing, well, they want these items published on the school's website as a detailed of primary instructional materials used in any class, updated semi-annually, making available for parent review upon request 24 hours prior to use. Any primary or supplemental material to be used in classroom instructions. Complaint resolution policy by local boards, principal or designee review and investigation, and principal determines whether violation occurred. Superintendent can review. Local Board of Education can review superintendent's determinations. State Board of Education can review decision of local board. Superior Court with jurisdiction over local Board of Education can review state board decision with cost award to the prevailing party. And the parties withstanding, parents of enrolled students, adult students, or emancipated minor, employees, school, DA of the county, penalty of violations, State Board of Education shall withhold 20% of QBE funds from the system or school with the violation. Funds restored within 45 days of demonstrated compliance. And Department of Education develops corrective action plan. Department of Education to submit report to appropriate House and Senate committees yearly with a list of violators and systems of schools from which funds were withheld. So they've created a crisis within our public schools. And then if one of the schools or administrators or teachers violate these, they're going to take 20% of your funding. So we have a issue that's not an issue, and they're creating this issue. And I really believe that some of this is because if they can keep us focused on HB 888, maybe we're not paying attention to some of the other things that are happening. And HB 1084 have very similar aspects within the bill. Well, while we were talking about these bills, HB 60 passed out of the House. HB 60 is the voucher bill that has passed out of the House committee and is headed back to the floor of the General Assembly, which again, the education in Georgia is being attacked and continue to have various ways that funds are being siphoned out of our education budget when the education budget is not fully funded. Where we have fully funded QBE, but it still hasn't made up for several years of austerity cuts. So we're talking about HB 88. HB 888. We're doing everything that we can to stop this bill. But while we're doing that, these other bills that don't have as much of our attention that we need our advocates focus on are moving through. So we could very well be fighting again another voucher bill, which HB 60. And when they finish with HB 60, they have HB 999. So we have several bills that we really need to be focused on, and encouraging all of our education advocates who believe in public education, because the majority of our students are educated in public education, that we should be fighting and doing everything that we can to ensure that our community schools have every resource available to ensure that every child in the seat has a good education. And this that we're fighting against is for a very small few that will never really meet the masses of those who are being taught in our public schools. And with that, I'm going to stop and turn it back over. Thank you for allowing me to share with you this evening.
Representative Carter, before you get away, whoops, I guess you got away.
Now I'm here.
Okay. What should we do in terms of these three bills that may be reflective of critical race theory and about the voucher bill? Are they about to go to the Senate, or what's the status now?
So HB 888 and HB 1084 are still in committee. So we have a subcommittee Wednesday, tomorrow or Wednesday, that I believe either 888 or 1084 is on the. So if you're available to speak against these bills or add some value that will help us, that meeting, I believe, is Wednesday at 11:30, and I can share with the chair to make sure that you all can have that. You can reach out to the members of the Education Committee and definitely the sponsors of the bills. As it relates to HB 60, I would say that you would need to start emailing and calling members of the Georgia General Assembly who support vouchers, because that bill has already passed the committee. It is on to rules, and we could possibly see it on the House floor if they feel like they have enough votes. I will say that this bill tried to come through last year and they did not have the vote, so it never came to a floor vote. And a lot of that was because members of the general public were really advocating. So again, reaching out to the members of the Education Committee and the members of the General Assembly in the House at large. The bills have not passed out the House, so they are not headed to the Senate yet.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Representative.
Thank you.
Are you going to be able to stay for a while? I know you had a conflict. I'm wondering if.
I will stay on. I'm going to mute because I have another meeting, but you know, in the Zoom world, we can do multiple meetings at the same time.
Thank you so much.
And I want to say, you know, I forgot to say this about myself. I'm a native Atlantan. I've been in Georgia all of my life, and I graduated from public school. And so I want to work as hard as we can to ensure that all of our schools have what they need, regardless of where the parents live or where the school is located. Every student deserves a great education. And we can't do it if we keep siphoning money out of the education budget.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Representative.
All right.
Our next speaker is, as I said, on the Board of Education. Our next speaker, Dr. Howard, is on the Cobb County Board of Education and also is a candidate for the Georgia State Superintendent of Education. Welcome.
Thank you so much. How's everybody doing?
We're doing fine.
It's good to be at an in-person event. This is cool. You know, I know most of you are masked, but I can see your eyes. I appreciate you smiling with your smizing. I appreciate that. I'm a pediatric dentist by profession. So a lot of people feel like happy they can hide behind their mask, but they think I'm studying your teeth or something, but I'm not that kind of dentist. I'm one of the few dentists that I don't really care that much about teeth. I mean, it's true. I care about people, and people happen to have teeth, right? And this is a service, but it's people that drives me and not necessarily teeth, right? But your smiles are beautiful even behind the mask. I'm a dad, and I have 3 children in elementary school, 5th grade, 3rd grade, and 1st grade. And for some of you, you remember those days. Some of you, you're like, I'm glad those days are gone, right? But we're in that sweet spot where the kids are really getting it and they're really understanding, and they still think that we're somewhat cool. They laugh at my jokes still. And I appreciate that. So when we talk about education policy, it's deeply personal for me, deeply personal for me. And when, not only for my own children, but the children that I see in my office every day. I still practice dentistry every day, and families are coming from all types of backgrounds with all type of situations. I mean, some really heart-wrenching situations, right? Some are just kind of living the great life, but all of them show up and they all have one thing in common. They all want the love. They all want to be treated with respect. They want us to actually see them and look them in the eye and actually want them to do well. I recruit them all into dental school, and just to get them thinking beyond school life. But that's where we're coming from. And for me, it's a faith walk, right? I know Democrats are afraid to talk about faith. We think the Republicans own it, but that's my walk, right? What drives me is my love for God and love for people in real life. In real life. Like, not what we see out there in the public square, and it bothers me. So everything you see from me, that's where it's coming from, and I want y'all to know that. So my topic is Georgia's children, CRT and HB 888, right? So when I see Georgia's children, I think of like my kids, right? Or my nieces, my nephews. I don't care where you are in the state, I feel like you're a cousin of mine. And that's how I approach the situation. And I'm so glad for Representative Carter bringing up HB 888 and then bringing up all of the cousins that have popped up. And you know that we have some lawmakers that are very savvy and they know the rules very well. And they planned this a long, long time ago to have one bill to get everybody, going after the shiny thing. And I'm one of them because I'm organizing other school board members in Metro Atlanta. We got a strong letter against HB 888, and you blink twice and then it's another bill. And then it's another bill. And then it's another bill. And then by the time you organize with one thing, and they know the general public can't keep up with this, it's strategic. And what you're seeing is it's a mess, and it makes you want to just say, what can you do? We don't have the numbers. But there's always something to do. We're going to keep telling the truth, because no matter what happens, the truth is still the truth. The truth is still the truth. So let's talk about something. Why? Well, by the way, y'all know the icebreaker game, 2 truths and a lie? It's a great game, right? You got a group over, you tell 2 truths and you tell 1 fib. And then that's how you kind of, you break the ice in a group setting. But we do that with legislation. We'll have bills placed by lawmakers that have some truth in there and then some really deceitful lies in there. And that way, when the crowd says, I can't believe you're doing this, blah, 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 blah. And then they say, what? All we're doing is this and this. They're pointing to the 2 truths, not the lie. And we do this back and forth. And then most people who are in between the right and the left arguing back and forth, most people just turn their ears off. They're like, what's the point? And then the people who are making the money after with all of this are just laughing all the way to the bank. And they're not all Republicans. Dramatic pause. And this is serious, y'all. We have to be able to tell some hard truths. The hard truth is that talking about history is hard. And it probably takes some professionals to do it properly. The folks at the Capitol are not the professionals. Our educators are the professionals. Trust our educators. But what do we do with our educators? And you alluded to this. Oh my gosh, you're heroes, after 1 week of kids being at home. I can't believe that oh my gosh, we're just so thankful. Here's some gift cards and here's some this and here's that and teacher appreciation week and blah, 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 and all of this. And then it's like, y'all need to go to work. How disrespectful is that? Right? And lawmakers have been doing the same thing. I liken it to a very abusive relationship. And I don't speak of this lightly because this you know, and those who have seen it and been up close, you know what an abusive relationship is like. The gaslighting, the look what I bought for you, bonuses, right? This is what our lawmakers and our governor sounds like. Look what I did for you. They're talking about money. At the same time they're giving you a check, they're disrespecting you in front of everybody. They don't value you, right? And then they get the public to look at you crazy. So now you're looking embarrassed and silly in front of everybody. That's an abusive relationship. And relationships are built off trust. Trust takes work. And when you break trust, it takes work to build trust back up. So I don't know about you, but I'm tired of it. I can make way more money and be a lot more comfortable just doing dentistry every day and going home to my family. But what happens is you start seeing the thing and you got to make a decision on what you're going to do about it. And that's why you are here today, because you decided you're going to do something about it. And that's why folks are online right now, because they saw something, they decide they're going to do something about it. And it is time for everyday people who may not know all the ins and outs of all the political this and that. You don't have to say all the right things. You don't have to write the perfect email. Just write it, call it something. I've been on the board of education in Cobb County. I came in like, okay, let's work together. Let's do it. And I'm all ready to work together and work, because in the community in our Smyrna area, we had one goal. We're like, look, we want our high school to be better. We're organizing families. We didn't care if you're Republican or Democrat. We want our schools to be academically excellent and our kids to be safe. Everybody wants that. Then you get to these infrastructures that are so beholden to reputation and power that they throw all of their values out of the window to maintain their power. And then when you say something about it, you're the one that's being divisive. I'm sorry. We've lived it. In Cobb County, we had board member comments at the end of all the board meetings. And we listened to people talking about, you know, standing up for the police and Back to Blue and all this stuff. And then I get on the board and I'm like, well, we have immigrants who are students and they are living in fear because of what's going on with our sheriff department at the time. The next meeting, the board member comments are cut. No discussion. No board member has comments. Gone. That's 2019. Then comes 2020 and the whole country is reminded that, oh, there's racism. Oh, you know, there's racism. Oh my gosh, Dr. Howard, I didn't know. And that's okay. Maybe you didn't know, right? And that's fine. And I don't mean to be facetious. Like maybe some people really are living in their own world. Cool. You didn't know. And here you are, you come and we as a board, okay, let's talk about this. And then we don't have anything that we want to say. We have the people who are not the Black people on the board who experience firsthand racism currently, who are not listened to when it comes to getting a resolution about racism. Imagine that. That's like me trying to lead the charge about women's issues, right? I need to listen. And I put my foot in the mouth in the past. Like I'm learning to listen. And guess we all need to. Okay? But that's what's been happening as a board. I bring this up because our board voted. No, I'm sorry. We hardly ever do resolutions, right? We don't do that in COP. We don't do it in COP. Then all of a sudden, CRT is #1 news. We have to deal with CRT. Where did this come from? I didn't even know what CRT was. And all of a sudden, we have a resolution. And then next thing we know, we're trying to figure out, well, what is CRT? It was never defined. And our board voted on something that was never clearly defined. And we have statements from our superintendent, like, we are not going to allow this in our schools. Like, what is it? And the next thing you know, programs like No Place for Hate quietly get dismissed from Cobb County schools. And then when we have swastikas on the bathrooms and all of this and all of that, now we're like, no, we stand firmly against hate and racism. But hold on, didn't we just get rid of No Place for Hate? Oh, we're not talking about that. So we've been putting the work in our little corner of the county of the state, but we're not done. So these are some of the reasons why we're running, but can we focus on the main thing? I know some really smart people that said, keep the main thing the main thing. Can our kids read on grade level? Where was all that coordinated energy and time and money and effort to make sure our kids are getting early literacy? So they start kindergarten with a leg up. But no, we don't have coordinated efforts for that. We have coordinated efforts to disrespect and continue this abusive relationship with our educators. Because if I can have to have the public lose confidence in our public education system, I can get them to say something else needs to be done. And lo and behold, the people who have been trumpeting the problem are now going to trumpet in a solution. Vouchers. Everybody's looking at that pie and they say, how can I make some money off that? The game's been the same, right? The players change, and it's time for us to continue pushing. So that's why I'm running, because guess what? I got one special interest, and that's our children. Not a second special interest, not a third. No, because lawmakers have all these different people that they owe favors to, and usually our kids get thrown out as soon as it gets hot. I got a job. I don't have to run for something to be somebody, right? I don't owe anybody any favors. There's no backroom deals on, let's do a fee for favor. You do a favor for me. No, we're standing up there, and every educator that I talk to, they want somebody with a backbone and tell the truth. And when you tell the truth, it's going to make people mad. And it's time to make people mad. Thank you.
Thank you. We got the point. OTA, as I say, is Coweta's own, and you're going to talk about is critical race theory good for the children's curriculum? Or is it perhaps a little cultural war going on?
Okay, thank you. I would like to thank Madam Chair and the party here this evening. When it comes to education, I'm nonpartisan, because children don't have a D or R behind their names. I've been a 53rd National PTA president, worked with both parties to make sure that we got the best for our children. So I have a few minutes here to be brief, be brilliant, and be gone. So let me put it out. I ask that you, hopefully I can move you in some of your thoughts and make your thoughts move into action. Contact your representatives and make sure you get out to vote on May the 24th and November the 8th. First, I'd like to thank Ms. Tracy Nance. Thank you so much for your exceptional work, professionalism, and just the courage that you bring every day. You're the epitome of wonderful teaching and things that you do. Representative Carter, I thank you for your advocacy in public schools. Dr. Howard, I call my brother. I thank you for your outstanding performance on the Cobb School Board. You're a family man and a great candidate, and I look forward to your leadership. And Representative Wilson, thank you too for your work, and my fellow colleague here on the panel. Is this bill about getting the best education for our children here in Georgia, or is it a culture war? And do we want to limit our children and teachers' ability to intellectually engage their minds, their ability to learn critical thinking skills, so they, and just explore different ideas? Two great men I like to invoke is Dr. Benjamin Elijah Mays, who was Martin Luther King's mentor, and said, what is the education? What is the purpose of an education? He says the purpose of an education is to build character, serve humanity, and earn a living, in that order. And King said, in his I Have a Dream speech, he says, I have a dream that one day my 4 little children can live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. So in education, that's sort of my core beliefs as we talk about this today. Education should be built on character, critical thinking skills, and creativity. And I want to start off with some facts. I like to deal with facts. And sometimes facts are not pretty, but that's what they are when we have to make these decisions. First of all, race is a social construct. In American history, laws and values were built around race. before the beginning of human trafficking of Africans to America, free forced labor, people identified with nationalities or groups, not skin color. There's one race, the human race. And every person on this earth is related. And it goes back to this lady named Lucy in East Africa. So all of us have some DNA. Says, Brother Howard was saying we're all cousins, one way or the other. So we're family, one big family. We need to treat each other as such. So let's talk about facts about history. Is a couple of laws in history that shapes, and I'll come from here and come down to Georgia. We had the Bacon Rebellion in 1676 to 1677. That right there, that rebellion was where Nathaniel Bacon organized and led a rebellion with indentured servants, enslaved Africans and Native Americans against a royal governor of Virginia. And because of that, when they crushed that rebellion, they put laws in place to establish a racial caste system and basically put whites over all others. This is one of the first major laws on the American soil before it became a country. Another major law or situation was the Stono Rebellion. That happened in South Carolina in 1739 when a group of enslaved Africans from Angola took over, basically started a rebellion out of Charleston, South Carolina. And because they basically had written plans and different things like that, that was discovered when it was crushed. And at that point in 1740, the state of South Carolina created some of what they call the slave code laws to prevent African Americans from reading and writing. And that went on through other southern states. So that's very important as we move around. Let's talk about the education system here in Georgia. The education system in Georgia is broken. It was designed that way. It has been legislated since the beginning of Georgian history. In 1777, in the Constitution, it legislated that they would support public education. Of course, the University of Georgia was created. And but the first white women were admitted in the University of Georgia in 1918. First African Americans were admitted in the University of Georgia in 1961. I'm an 8th generation Georgian. So my public schools didn't integrate until the early 70s up in North Georgia. I think Atlanta integrated in 1961. Georgia's first public funded high school was in Augusta in 1783. First African-American high school to be funded was in 1874. In 1954, when Brown versus Education was passed, we had Governor Griffin in office at the time. He was a staunch segregationist, and he pledged to keep Georgia's schools segregated come hell or high water. And he also promised that he would make every school in Georgia private before he integrated them. And today, Georgia is still doing that in subtle ways that the average person doesn't know about. Every year, well, like this last year, Georgia gave $100 million to the school scholarship organizations, which helps fund private schools that practiced segregation back in the 60s, and they still do to this day. Just call them segregation academies. The next governor that came in after him continued to pledge segregation and said, no, not one, meaning not one black child in a white school. That was one of his mottos on the campaign trail. And again, as I mentioned, most of the schools in Georgia, particularly in rural areas, did not integrate until 1969, 1970, 1971, because of the U.S. Supreme Court's decision on Green versus the School Board of Education of Kent County, who was in Virginia. But that right there, basically the federal government will take their funding away if they didn't do it. So that's when schools really begin to integrate in Georgia. Here's another fact. And if you out there online, or just take this down, Google Channel 2 and ALEC Exposed. That's ALEC Exposed. Our assembly is basically controlled by the American Legislative Exchange Council. If you Google that, you'll see where laws are made in the back rooms. And we can make a difference as Georgians in trying to root that out and get our kids what they really need. Because with the stated facts, let's go into what this is. It's a culture war. It's not new. It's ongoing and will continue to pick up. The Democratic, I was a national PTA president from 2013 to 2015. In September of 2014, 55 million children in public schools around the country, it shifted. It became a majority minority at that point. And that's only an American term. I mean, I've been to 25 countries in the world, and the majority of the world are people of color. This shift is a threat to the dominant culture at this time. Culture is built around identity. And in a culture war, our teachers probably could not teach in Psychology 101 about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maslow, he taught about you needing your basic needs, belonging to a group, and self-actualization. Maslow actually learned that with the Blackfoot Nation, where he spent 6 weeks on their reservation in their land, and they had totally flipped around. They believed on people being self-actualized first, and then needs being met, and then belonging and creating legacies. But those are the type of things that with critical race theory talks about, adjusting past wrongs and giving proper credit to what needs to be done. And I'm wrapping up now. Again, we talked about powerful people cannot afford to educate people that they oppress, because when they are truly educated, you will not ask for power, you will take it. So that's what they believe in the assembly, but we just want to live in peace with people. In the history classes, some of the things under this law, books like The African Origins of Civilization, Stolen Legacy, They Came Before Columbus, that talks about history that's not taught in classes, like Africans transferring, going across the Atlantic Ocean 400 or 500 years before Columbus was here. Or modern day books like The Outliers, Malcolm Gladwell, talking about the importance of culture, opportunity, and preparation for success. Or The Coming Jobs War. These are current books. Would they want the kids to watch Hamilton? Hamilton was a mulatto out of the West Indies. Those are the type of things that they have a problem with. Will they have a problem when we start asking that our kids are taught more foreign languages? In China right now, over 300,000 children, 300 million are learning the English language. That's about the size of the United States. So these are the type of things that we deal with. So it's very important that our teachers are able to teach true history, which is very important. And with that being said, we're experiencing a major cultural war. As Tracy mentioned earlier, I applaud her for her courage last June when she stood up at the State School Board of Education. When the 1619 project came out a couple of years ago, that really started the cultural war to really look at history in a more objective way. But all we want, experience this war. We just want our children to become better people, critically think, and imagine and create a new world. That's all Georgians want. And I thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, Otha. We can be reminded again and again about historical facts and be better off for it. We Dems kind of like facts, don't we? Yeah. We're now going to hear from our neighbor. Yes, what is it? Fulton and Matthew Wilson, representative from the House of Representatives. And Matthew's going to tell us what we might do if we are concerned with the legislation that's being proposed, and then kick in whatever else you'd like to talk about, Matthew.
Sure. And thank you very much, Madam Chair, and the party for hosting us tonight. My good friend Otha for inviting me to participate. If y'all were in this room Saturday morning, you saw me there, so I want to try not to repeat anything that I said then. But hey to everyone and everyone online. I am State Representative Matthew Wilson. I represent portions of Fulton and DeKalb counties in North Atlanta. But I grew up not too far from here in Griffin. So I do feel like I'm in the homeland, as it were. I have served 2 terms in the State House and serve on the House Education Committee. I am a lawyer in Atlanta, but before I went to law school, I taught 6th grade math and science. And I was telling Tracy, and I told some of y'all on Saturday, that there's nothing that prepares you for service in the General Assembly like having taught middle school. Or I'll say having raised a middle schooler, for those of you who've raised middle schoolers. It is an exercise in patience and listening and making sure you're not taking things too personally that are kind of hurled at you with emotion, right? You know, I'm so glad that we're here tonight talking about this subject and also talking about some bigger themes. And I'm so glad that my colleague, Representative Doreen Carter, was on this panel and went before me and highlighted some of the other bills, because it is easy to focus on HB 888, and it has a very memorable number. But these things, as you've picked up on, they pop up over here, they pop up over there. And when we're in session, in particular, in legislative session, things move very quickly, because once the proponents of a bill realize, well, this particular version of the bill in this particular committee that it's assigned to is not going to work for one way or another, because the committee chairman is opposed to it, or we don't have the votes in this committee. So we're going to have to find another vehicle, as we refer to them. Either introduce another bill, or maybe start over in the Senate, or maybe insert it into a bill that may or may not have anything to do with the same subject area. So it's not just about, and I want to make sure we all get our heads wrapped around this. It's not just about defeating House Bill 888. It's about this issue and wherever it's going to pop up, because it will pop up in numerous, multiple different ways that we can't even foresee quite yet. We just have to let play out. I also think that it's very helpful when we are in particular when we're brainstorming and talking amongst ourselves about how to push back against something that feels like it's got some momentum behind it, is to talk about and remember the bigger context of what this is occurring in. Okay, y'all, 2022 is an election year. Okay, every member of the Georgia General Assembly will be on the ballot. Every statewide officer in Georgia, including the governor, will be on the ballot. That is what this is about. Okay, it is not just opposing CRT. If you look at the governor's State of the State address that he gave, where he outlined his legislative priorities for the year, he rolled this into quite a ball of horrible mess, and it was all about our schools. Okay, it was about banning books, literally banning books in schools, opposing CRT, making sure that transgender students can't compete in athletics, and punishing the schools who allow them to participate. It's about school vouchers, and it's about parental bill of rights. In other words, putting individual parents on par with the school boards in exercising control over, you name it, within our public schools. Okay. He promised all of these things in his State of the State address. which was essentially a campaign message. He is in the fight of his life right now to keep his seat as governor. He's got to first win a very competitive primary, and then he's going to face Stacey Abrams and lose in November. But that's why we're having this that's what we're talking about. We're talking about campaign politics. Okay. So it's just helpful as we're talking about all of this to keep that in perspective, because every single thing that we do down at the legislature, and when I talk to folks about, you know, how do you lobby against something or for something, for example, I say, you got to remember everything we do. There are two motivations behind every single thing that we do at the legislature. One is policy, and policy does play a part in this. And the other is politics. And usually politics plays the outsized role, okay? And this year, in this election year, like 90% of this is about the politics. So keeping that in mind when you're trying to persuade folks in particular who may not be persuadable on the policy, right? Because for them, it's all about the politics. And, you know, I thought it was really interesting that the only pieces of legislation that the governor mentioned in his State of the State address, other than the budget and who we were going to give away lots of money to, which, don't get me wrong, Georgians need money right now, and our state is prospering. And so we should, you know, I'm all for giving teachers a pay raise. I'm all for law enforcement bonuses and frontline workers. But the only other bills he talked about were these school social issue bills. Okay, that is his priority this session, is getting those things through. And you got to ask yourself, why? Why schools? Because it worked in Virginia last year. They had a governor's race, right? And the issue going into the final days of that race, it was all about schools, parents having control, opposing CRT, right? And it worked. At least it was perceived to have worked from the view of the Georgia Republicans. So they say, we're going to try it here. We're going to try it here, because if we don't try it, we might lose, right? You know, it's interesting on this particular issue with critical race theory. I've actually been taught critical race theory, like some of our panelists have, in a Georgia public school, the University of Georgia Law School. It was the University of Georgia Law School, and it wasn't even my first year. No, I had to be a second year before I was even allowed to take the course, because the point, and the point that, you know, our experts up here have talked about is you've got to have some working knowledge to be able to engage in this conversation. And guess what? Fifth graders and sixth graders don't have that, right? But we know critical race theory isn't being taught in our schools. That's not what this is about. I'm glad that it was also brought up about the Senate version of this bill, which is Senate Bill 377. The governor's floor leader, one of the governor's floor leaders in the Senate, Senator Bo Hatchett, is sponsoring that legislation. And, you know, he has been, this has been covered a little bit in the AJC recently, but he's had a tough time defining CRT lately, right? And I've heard from some of my colleagues that, you know, maybe behind the scenes, he's asking for some help. If anyone knows how to define CRT, please come see me. You know, we need to be able to define what it is. So look, let's get to the practical brass tacks of what can we do sitting in this room on Zoom. What can we do if you want to voice your concern about this? I think chiefly it is speaking to the practical impact that it's going to have. We're not going to win over anybody by saying they're not teaching CRT in our schools. They're already convinced that we are. They're already convinced of that. So we're not going to win them over on that. Let's talk about the practical impact it has in Georgia's classrooms, against our teachers, And most importantly, the most important thing that we can all do is to not disengage from this process. As difficult as it seems, as hard as it is to keep up with the bill numbers and which committee it's in and where it is, and it changes every day, because it does. Do not disengage. I would encourage everybody in this room in particular to reach out to your representatives and your state senators, because if you're in this room, they're likely from another party. They need to hear from you. They absolutely need to hear from you. And when you're speaking to your representatives, please include your address in the email address that you send them, or however you communicate with them. Make sure they know you live in their district. You are a voter in their district. They need to know that, because we get inundated, especially during the session, with emails in particular. And most of them are form emails, which can be good, but when you're getting 300 emails that are literally the exact same message, just the name has changed, you're like, I get it. Okay. All right. These go in a folder and I'm not going to read them because I get it. But if I get an email from someone that says, I am your constituent, and in particular, if they put their address at the bottom, I look and I say, yep, that's in Brookhaven or Sandy Springs, or no, it's not. Those people go to the top of the priority list for a response because they sent me to the Capitol, right? Or they can prevent me from coming back. So understand your power there. And then also, I would say after you talk to those folks, focus on the committees. The House Education Committee in particular, the Senate Education Committee. Everyone's contact information is available on the legislative website. Also, I will give the leadership credit. Last year, they overhauled that website. It is much more user-friendly. Everything is live streamed now. Excuse me. So you can watch the hearings even if you are not there. You can also, they're archived, so you can go back and watch a hearing if you missed it. The Twitter accounts for the House and the Senate are run by professionals, okay? Nonpartisan professionals who literally are just saying, this bill was heard today. It was voted on. This was the outcome. So if you're a Twitter person, those Twitter handles are good if you're trying to keep up with what's going on. Those might be good for you to watch. If you can come down to the Capitol, that is the absolute best way to engage on an issue. That's not always the easiest way. It's probably the hardest way, actually, for folks, just because you got to take time off to get down there. And then also, we're constantly changing our schedule from hour to hour. So a hearing that may be on the calendar right now for Wednesday, tomorrow may change, or an hour before the hearing, we may hear, yeah, this has been canceled, or it's been pushed off, or it's going to be tomorrow. So that can be frustrating and difficult. But while you're there, you can still talk to other legislators who are there, and you can find friendlies like Doreen and myself who can help you find who you're looking for if you need help with that. I'm just so glad to see this turnout and this turnout on Zoom for this evening, because this is what we're going to be talking about all session, these issues. And the most important thing that I want you to take away from tonight is not to disengage from this, because as the other panelists have said, that's what they're expecting you to do, is to they're going to make it so difficult and so hard to keep up with, and constantly changing. The numbers are going to constantly change, that you just say, look, I've got a life. I've got a job. I've got kids to raise. I don't have time to do this. Stay engaged. Stay engaged. We really need you, and I appreciate you showing up. I'm happy to take questions if, Madam Chair.
Okay, Madam Chair, I'll just Again, some of the things taken from everyone. Thank you, Tracy, for defining what it is, because if you're going to tackle a matter, you got to know what you're dealing with. I thank you, Representative Wilson, for just encouraging the engage as we continue to move forward, and telling them how to do it. It's so important that you talk to your representatives, email them, call them. And you make a difference. It's very important. Dr. Howard, thank you again for encouraging the parents and children to really be engaged and just to care for them. That is so important. They are the priority there as far as getting the best education possible. And it's a distraction. Like I said, again, don't let it be a distraction. We have so much, as Representative was saying, we have so much money now in Georgia that we can invest in schools, invest in educations, and in our education here. We need to ensure that we're not taken advantage of by limiting our teachers on what they can teach. And I believe, education should be age appropriate too, but we should give them the opportunity and flexibility to do what they need to do and teach our children how to critically think and be creative to make Georgia continue to be a great place to live. With that being said, Madam Chair, if you want to questions for folks,
Yeah,
we can do that.
We'll open it up for questions. Are there any questions coming from this floor?
Oh, okay. Okay, so my question is I'm really worried about these maps that the Republicans have drawn to redistrict our state. So what exactly is going on with that? Is this in the courts, and where do we stand?
Yeah, so we are still in the redistricting process. Basically, it has been 2 phases. Last fall, we had the phase to redraw the congressional districts and the state legislative districts for the House and the Senate. We did that last fall. Now that we're in our regular session, we're having to do the redistricting for the municipalities, the counties and the cities, for the commission seats, the Board of Education seats, those seats. For counties and cities that have elections this year. There'll be some more next year for counties and cities that have elections next year. And so the maps that were passed last fall for the state legislative maps and the congressional maps, yes, those are being litigated. There are several lawsuits that are ongoing. And so stay tuned to see the outcome. Those were brought by Georgia groups, but also some national sort of watchdog groups that have been engaged in what we call impact litigation across the country and have successes. So, and we've seen in other states recently some recent successes in getting maps enjoined. So we'll see about that. And then, of course, as we pass these local maps, right now in regular session, as soon as they're passing, sort of litigation is popping up. So stay tuned.
Hi, guys. Thanks.
Oh,
I just wanted to add one thing. Even today, there was a subcommittee hearing about what's happening in Cobb County. So for those that don't know, in Cobb, where I live, our school board, drew maps, worked with an attorney's office and kind of came up with the map. And we had a split vote of 4-3. Republicans moved forward. That just condensed pretty much the Black people into the southern part of Cobb to kind of maintain a 4-3 for the next foreseeable future. That is proceeding. And then typically the county legislators get together and they kind of really run that process. But in Cobb, because the Cobb County legislators are like leaning Democrat now, they actually bypass the county local control and went straight to the subcommittee. And so that's the kind of thing that's happening. The things that some folks are saying they believe in, local control, you're bypassing the typical ways that's done to have decisions being made by legislators who don't even live in Cobb County. That's happening now. Where the Board of Commissioners in Cobb County's just flipped a 3-2 split. And one of the newly elected Democratic commissioner was drawn out of her own district and now forced to either resign or move. And she just got there, you know? And so it is blatant, it's pretty bad. And I was happy to participate in public comment for that, but these things are moving so fast that we're literally scrambling, trying to be a part of the process. So we'll continue to try to stay engaged. And I didn't even hear the outcome of everything because I hopped in the car to come here, but that's the kind of thing that's happening. It's happening in places where things have changed, right? It's changing everywhere, but when you have a shift from Republican to Democratic control, now all of a sudden, and Gwinnett, let's make it nonpartisan. It wasn't nonpartisan before, the school board. And then in Cobb, oh, let's just bypass the delegation. But the delegation used to do all this work. Now let's just bypass them and go straight to the state. So that's the kind of thing that's happening. And, you know, we have to be aware of that.
And anyway, of the list of, I think there were 24 legislators, we actually tracked down 2 and had conversations with 2. Who we spoke to that day mostly were the office administrators. So I would like, because I'm perfectly willing to go down there and tramp around again. It's kind of fun. It's like playing hide and seek. Do you have any practical advice? How can I let these guys know, ladies and guys, know that I've come to their office? I have made the effort. I got stopped by your gatekeeper, but this is the issue and I'm concerned about it. Got any practical advice?
Yeah, and thank you for that. That's certainly the struggle is real to find a legislator. Especially during session. So for some legislators, telling them ahead of time you're coming will work and say, hey, I'm going to be there on this day. I had over the weekend, I had 2 constituents call me and say, I'm going to be there on Tuesday. Where can I meet you and what time, you know? I just, gave them my cell phone number. So text me when you're here, I'll come out and meet you, kind of thing. That'll work with some legislators. Others will say, okay, now I know when to be gone, right? If they're not there, I would say a handwritten note is the best. And Leader Trammell said this on Saturday, right? Because we get so few actual handwritten communication now, it's all form email blasts that we get, right? You go, it's typically the advocacy groups who are doing great work, right, on their issues, but they have a form where you say, just plug in your name and the email is already generated to the legislator and you just hit send and it goes off to every legislator or just yours. But if you can leave a handwritten note with your, like I said, include your contact information so that they know you are a person, that's very helpful. The other thing that I failed to mention earlier in my comments is if you can't be there or you don't have a direct connection to the legislator because they're not your representative or senator, another great way is to think about who do you know who does have a better connection to that person. And in some like for Coweta County, just thinking, your representatives are all Republicans. Okay. So you're going to send them an email and they're going to say, okay, cool. All right. Right. But what about your local elected officials, Mr. Commissioner, who does a great job, I don't, but think about, and I'm truly not trying to put any pressure on you, Mr. Commissioner, but here I go. But, think about, especially on issues like this, can you get your school board to engage in this issue at the state level and put out an opinion? Maybe not. Maybe that does more harm than good. But think about those ways. Or, do you happen to go to church with your state representative? Can you get a church leader to reach out to them? Just be creative. Be creative thinking about that. You'd be kind of surprised who that knows them, sort of thing.
Okay, I would like to ask Tracy a couple questions, at least one. You gave us the 5 tenets of CRT. And what I've noticed is that when you Google, which is where most of us or Bing get our information from, the titles do not match up. So is there a definite set of these are the 5 tenets?
I know exactly what you're talking about because I've seen that recently. We love to summarize things and, simmer something down to just bullet points. So I know what you're talking about. I've seen the 5 tenets before. But in practice and in the academics, there's not necessarily 5 prescribed things for critical race theory. It's simply understanding that it is institutionalized and it is a product of everyone's decisions that we make. And it is not where you can say, oh, he is a racist. No, it's the decision that you made led to this because racism has been around for as long as it has been in this country, right? When I held up this, I was talking specifically about social emotional learning. And this is under attack right now because of that social awareness piece. In some counties across our state, teachers are no longer allowed to even say the words social emotional learning. For example, in Fulton County, they have to call it well-being and connectedness. And my mind immediately goes to how much time was lost in those discussions over such silly semantics when we're trying to teach kids how to thrive.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a question as far as practical. Okay, I had questions as far as practical advice for engaging the Coweta County School Board because they want nothing to do with anything. I got a letter today from East Coweta High School. There's over 4,000 kids there. The principal sent a letter saying, although COVID is up 20%, don't worry because masks are going to stay optional. So they are totally catering to their base. I mean, they're taking this culture war. So what would be practical advice to go if the school board is not going to engage? How do you combat some of the culture to maybe get people that are on the fence to vote or to understand this comes down to maybe a Kemp Abrams thing? That how do you get past that to get the bigger message across? Like I just recently found out Coweta County was the last public school in Georgia to desegregate. That's crazy to me. I mean, maybe to some other, I'm like, wait, what? I'm like, and when we first moved down there and they're like, oh, that's the old Black hospital. I was like, wow, I was like, it really is different south of the Mason-Dixon line. What is going on down here? So when I go to the school board and I hear some of the discussions, I don't know what the best tactic is. Is it to come at them with facts, or is it let's just throw it all out? You're doing distraction, I can do distraction. Let's talking about the freshmen having sex in the bathroom. Let's talk about the 3 code reds in 10 days. Let's talk about pepper spray with freshman girl. Is it more distraction or is it just facts? Like, I'm going to tell you the facts, and that's not, maybe our school board won't correct you, but there are parents that will, and that can maybe get in the paper, maybe get on a Zoom meeting. I mean, what's the best approach?
I'll try that again. Is that better? Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. But two things that are effective is consistency using public comment at school board meetings. And you can hammer a message home again and again and again and again. When we're all over the place, oftentimes it dilutes the message. So please consider having a coordinated, like you and others, just again and again and again, like just commit, like we'll be there every month or however often you meet here. The other thing is emailing. When you email the superintendent, maybe email all the school board members together, but or email specific school board members and CC the rest of them. Try to get a response to a specific question about safety, because now you're time stamping. It's documented. It's forever in public record. If there's ever a records request, that's going to show up.
So I can say when your daughter and my son, like I can make it real personal too. I can say.
So
hey,
I was
by the way.
advising facts, but not necessarily going personal. I think that having a very strategic, clear, what are you trying to? If it's student safety, talk about student safety. But once we start kind of going where like they're doing all this crazy stuff, we do crazy stuff. Now you just got more crazy. So I would
It's not crazy. It's just when they're talking about mass and I'm worried that our STEM program's gone because of funding.
I got you.
And when I'm worried that we lost
Yeah.
they've lost like over 200 kids graduating this year. Where are they? Are
Yeah.
they coming back? Where did they go?
Just sharing recommendation as a board member. So just keep this. I think that'll be a good strategy, because I think what you're saying, this is important, but just trying to stay clear and consistent.
Thank you.
Okay, just hold on one second. Just wanted to say to our Zoomers out there, if you have a question, put it in the chat, please. The chat button's at the bottom of your window. Put it in the chat. We'll get to y'all too.
I just want to add, Dr. Howard, that this tactic has already been employed by this body, and the school board has a minimum of 9 people that are allowed to speak. And you have to pre-register, and they really want to know what your comment is before you're allowed to speak. And then it's only 9 people at that. So now the emailing and all that, we could do that, but I'm just point.
I want to make a point also, because I've helped parents organize. I would say one of the things you can do, I tell parents, when you go with an issue to the school board, think about the consequences. Board members have duties and responsibilities. So make sure, I provide documentation, like say something to put on record. If you don't fix this, here's the consequence. And then some of them pick up on it pretty quickly that we're setting ourselves up for a lawsuit. And I've seen that. So document, here are the facts, here are the consequences. And if you have time, or find people, here are the laws that you are violating. And at that point, it messes with their livelihood. So it may take a month or 2 months or whatever, but they'll pick up on it.
So one of the things that happens a lot at our Coweta County School System meetings is there is an active effort amongst other parties to throw this up in the face of everything. I guess my question is, how would you actually engage with people who are adamant that CRTs in our school system or SEL, Satan's playbook, or, things like that? How do you actually engage with those people? Because how do we come back?
I'll try to answer that. I have a colleague on the board who believe masks are harmful and hurting people, who believe that vaccines are harmful and hurting people. That's a colleague on our board. And we have to find a way to still work together. And so I try to approach it thinking like family. Sometimes you have family members where it's just like, ooh, how do we come back from this, but we're still family? So if we start from the premise of like, okay, we're family, we disagree on a lot. So at least I'm not coming from a position of like, I'm trying to like cancel you out of my life, right? Like we're here, we got to figure this thing out. But on a practical level, I think emails are very powerful because you ask very specific questions that are targeted, not a rant, but very targeted. And you really try to get a response. And then what you want to do is let people say what they're going to say. And now that's public information, you know? And so now you kind of stand behind the fact that somebody who is leading our schools saying something, and then now the press can get involved and all of that. So basically you bring to light what's happening behind closed doors. And the truth is still the truth, right? So maybe the strategy is just tell the truth where everybody can see it. It's the strategy of the civil rights movement, right? How if all the infrastructure is working against you, what do? You just shine a big old spotlight on it so they have to do it in front of everybody. And then you let the society start shifting and pressuring, you know, and that may take some time, but that the work is necessary. So just consider that effort, and please consider that email strategy to go along with what the hard work that you're already doing.
We have a question from Christina Joseph in the chat. How are teachers responding to HB 888? I would expect that if it passes, it would create a toxic atmosphere within our schools, particularly for teachers of color. Everything they say will be under a microscope, and this is a time when there's already teacher shortages. Will this bill drive teachers to pursue other professions, i.e. not worth the drama anymore? Anyone want to speak to that?
Man, it's a terrible concern right now at a time when it's just not the right time to be showing disrespect to educators. It's already so hard. It's so hard. I really, really wish that our families could be in the classroom and see what it's actually like. And I know we got a little taste of Zoom last year, but you know, even when teachers were at home teaching over Zoom, we were working. We were writing lesson plans. We were working extra hard to engage families. We were making house calls to see why the kid wasn't on Zoom. But it's a terrible concern right now. Teachers of color are already underrepresented in our profession. And so it absolutely is a concern. A lot of teachers, even in the skin that I'm in, will self-censor themselves because they're afraid of stepping on toes or getting in trouble. I cannot begin to tell you how many hundreds of emails that I received during my tenure as Georgia Teacher of the Year, because public school teachers are afraid to speak out. They're afraid of backlash. And so they would send it along to me, and then I would get up and say it. But it's an amazing job. I want so many incredibly passionate and smart individuals to go into teaching because our kids need it. And I think now more than any other time, we have to uplift this profession. We really do. And our teachers of color are becoming even more marginalized with these types of politics. And, you know, we were talking about critical race theory, how it identifies policies that tend to, even if it's facially, you know, blind to racism, policies that exacerbate it. 888 is one of those. If you're taking away funding from schools that really need it, who are you hurting? It's the kids.
Is this mic on? Okay. Mr. Thornton, I was wondering, the information you shared with us, it was quite succinct and very, very valuable. Are you willing to share that, or is that your own personal information?
No, you can see my notes. I have them. Just research and knowledge and like I say, and understanding challenges that we have. You have to look at the history and understand the history and the root of the situation before you can bring resolution to it.
Maybe I can suggest that if you want to put those things together, we'll put it in our newsletter. Well, thank you, panel. My bragging about you was verified and vindicated. And we probably should let you get home. So Coweta County is, despite some differences with the Board of Education, it's a good place to live, a good place to visit, so y'all come back.